The house on
Welcome to the new
1328
era of
Autumn
video
Birch
creation
Lane
with
used to
Hey
hum,
Jen.
not loudly,
Simply type
not
your
with noise,
script
but
to
with
get started.
life. It was the kind
Welcome
of
to the
place
new
where the
era
back
of
door
video
was always
creation
left
with
slightly
Hey Jen.
open, where
Simply
cinnamon
type
lived in
your
the
script
corners
to get
during
started.
December, and where
Welcome
someone was
to the
always
new
humming
era of
while
video
folding
creation
laundry.
with
But
Hey
that
Jen.
winter, the house
Simply
had grown
type your
quiet.
script to
Not
get
the kind of
started.
quiet that comes after
Welcome to the
laughter,
new
but the
era of
kind
video
that settles in
creation with Hey
bones
Jen.
and doesn't leave.
Simply type
Rachel
your script
Whitmore
to
stepped
get
through the
started.
threshold of the home she'd
Welcome
grown
to the
up
new
in
era
and
of video
paused.
creation
It still
with Hey
smelled
Jen.
like lemon wood
Simply
polish
type your
and
script
rosemary
to
from
get
the
started.
garden, but it no longer
Welcome to
felt
the
like
new
hers.
era of
The
video
furniture was in the
creation with
same
Hey Jen.
spots, the photos
Simply
still
type your
framed on the
script to
walls,
get
but
started.
some had changed.
Welcome
Her
to the
mother's
new era
picture,
of video
once centered on the
creation with Hey
mantel,
Jen.
had been moved,
Simply type your
replaced by a
script to get
minimalist
started.
sculpture in brushed
Welcome
gold,
to the
the
new
kind of
era
piece
of
you
video
didn't touch,
creation with
the
Hey
kind
Jen.
Claire Bennett liked.
Simply type your
Rachel,
script
her
to get
father's
started.
voice called from the kitchen.
Welcome to the
You made
new
it
era
just in
of video
time. She
creation
managed
with
to
Hey
smile
Jen.
as she dropped her
Simply
duffel
type your
bag by the
script to
hallway
get started.
closet. Traffic was
Welcome
awful.
to the new
Snow
era
flurries
of video
just north of
creation with Hey
Harrisburg.
Jen.
Thomas Whitmore
Simply
stepped
type your
out,
script to
apron
get
tied
started.
over a dress shirt,
Welcome to
sleeves
the
rolled
new
up.
era of
He
video
looked older
creation
than
with
she
Hey Jen.
remembered, greyer at
Simply
the
type your
temples,
script
but his
to get
eyes were
started.
still the same soft
Welcome
and
to the
absent,
new era
somehow,
of video
like he lived
creation
half
with
in
Hey
thought.
Jen.
Behind
Simply
him,
type
Claire
your script
appeared.
to get
Darling,
started.
you're here.
Welcome
Claire's
to the
voice
new
was
era of
honey-wrapped
video
velvet.
creation with
She
Hey
kissed the
Jen.
air near Rachel's
Simply
cheek.
type your script
Dinner's
to
almost
get
ready.
started.
I made your favorite
Welcome
sweet
to the new
potato
era
mash
of
with
video
pecans.
creation with Hey
Rachel
Jen.
nodded.
Simply
Thanks.
type
She
your
didn't
script
remember
to get
ever
started.
telling Claire her
Welcome
favorite
to the new
dish.
era of
That was
video
Linda's
creation with Hey
recipe.
Jen.
Her mother used to mash
Simply
the
type your
potatoes by
script to
hand,
get started.
singing off-key
Welcome
while
to the new
Rachel
era of
stirred.
video
But she said
creation with Hey
nothing and
Jen.
followed them into the
Simply
dining
type
room.
your
The
script to
table
get
was set
started.
with gold-trimmed
Welcome
china
to the
that
new
hadn't
era
been
of
there
video
last year.
creation
The
with Hey
chandelier
Jen.
above was new
Simply
too,
type your
modern,
script to
sharp,
get started.
cold. It cast
Welcome to the new
diamond-shaped
era of
reflections
video
on the crystal
creation with Hey
glasses,
Jen.
but no
Simply
warmth.
type your
Family
script
members,
to get
most of them
started.
from Claire's side,
Welcome to the
occupied the
new era
chairs.
of
There were
video
unfamiliar
creation with Hey
faces,
Jen.
perfumed
Simply
hugs,
type
and
your
loud
script to get
voices talking
started.
over each other. Her
Welcome to
father
the
sat
new
at the
era of
head,
video
beaming at
creation with
everyone
Hey
like a
Jen.
man proud of a
Simply
painting
type
he
your
didn't
script to
actually
get
help
started.
create. Rachel
Welcome
took the
to the
seat at
new
the
era
far
of
end,
video
the one her
creation
mother
with Hey
used to sit
Jen.
in during
Simply
holidays.
type your
Claire
script
sat
to get
beside
started.
Thomas, her perfectly
Welcome to the
manicured
new era
hands
of video
folded like a
creation with Hey
hostess from a
Jen.
lifestyle
Simply
magazine.
type your script to
Conversation
get
rolled
started.
on. A train Rachel
Welcome
didn't
to the
board.
new era
Someone
of video
complimented the
creation with
remodel.
Hey Jen.
Another laughed
Simply
about the
type your
hideous
script
wallpaper
to get
that used to
started.
be in the hallway.
Welcome
Rachel's
to the new
knuckles
era of
tightened
video
around her
creation
fork.
with Hey
She
Jen.
remembered helping her
Simply
mother
type your
paste that
script to
wallpaper
get
up
started.
one summer. They'd
Welcome
chosen
to
it
the
from a
new era of
catalogue,
video
floral
creation
and
with Hey
faded
Jen.
pink. It took
Simply
2
type your
days and a
script
dozen
to get
mistakes
started.
to hang it straight.
Welcome
Her
to the
mother
new
had called
era
it
of video
perfectly
creation with Hey
imperfect.
Jen.
Now it was gone,
Simply type your
replaced by
script
slate
to get
grey
started.
paint and abstract
Welcome
art
to the new
prints.
era of
Rachel
video
tuned in
creation
just
with
in
Hey
time
Jen.
to hear Claire
Simply
speaking.
type your
We
script to
finalised
get started.
everything on Monday. It's all
Welcome to the
official
new
now.
era of
Thomas
video
raised his
creation
glass.
with Hey
To a
Jen.
smooth transition,
Simply type your
Rachel
script
blinked.
to get
What
started.
transition? Her father
Welcome to the
chuckled,
new era
not
of video
unkindly.
creation
The
with
house,
Hey Jen.
honey. We
Simply
transferred the
type your
deed.
script
Claire's
to
the
get
official
started.
homeowner now.
Welcome
A
to the
pause.
new
Claire
era of
added with
video
that
creation
same
with Hey
silk-wrapped
Jen.
tone. It just
Simply
made
type your
sense.
script
I
to
live
get
here
started.
full time. Your
Welcome
father's
to
been
the new era
overwhelmed
of
with the
video
paperwork.
creation with Hey
And,
Jen.
well, your mother
Simply
would have
type your
wanted someone who
script to
cared
get
to take
started.
responsibility.
Welcome to the
Rachel
new
nodded
era of
once,
video
slowly,
creation with
like
Hey
someone
Jen.
acknowledging a
Simply
verdict
type your
already
script
delivered.
to get
She
started.
didn't say a word.
Welcome
Not
to
then,
the new
but
era
something
of
inside
video
her
creation
shifted.
with Hey
Not an
Jen.
explosion,
Simply
just a
type your
quiet
script
crack,
to get
like
started.
ice breaking beneath
Welcome
still
to the new
water.
era
She
of
made it
video
through
creation
dessert
with Hey
without
Jen.
speaking much more.
Simply type
She
your
laughed
script
politely
to
when
get started.
expected, smiled with her
Welcome to the
teeth,
new
and
era of
cleared her
video
plate.
creation
But her
with Hey
mind had
Jen.
already moved
Simply
elsewhere.
type your
To
script
questions,
to get started.
to documents,
Welcome
to
to the
timelines.
new era
That
of
night,
video
after the
creation
guests
with
had
Hey
gone
Jen.
and her father
Simply type
retreated
your script
upstairs,
to get started.
Rachel sat alone in
Welcome
her
to the
childhood
new
room.
era
The
of
bed
video
was smaller than
creation
she
with Hey
remembered.
Jen.
The walls had
Simply
been
type your
repainted a
script to modern
get started.
beige. The bookshelf,
Welcome to the
once
new
full of
era
her
of
dog-eared
video creation
paperbacks,
with
now
Hey
held
Jen.
candles and
Simply
faux
type your
plants.
script
Only
to
the
get
closet
started.
door creaked the same
Welcome
way.
to the
She
new
sat
era
on the
of
floor
video
and pulled
creation
her
with
old
Hey
laptop
Jen.
from her bag.
Simply
It was
type your
dusty,
script to get
slow,
started.
but familiar.
Welcome
She
to
booted
the
it
new
up
era
and
of
began
video
searching.
creation with
Public
Hey Jen.
records, county
Simply type
deeds,
your script
probate
to get
filings.
started.
It took 2 hours
Welcome
to
to the
find
new
what she was
era of
looking
video
for,
creation
and when
with
she
Hey
did,
Jen.
the breath caught
Simply
in her
type your
chest.
script
Linda
to get
Whitmore's
started.
will had been updated,
Welcome to
or
the
rather
new era of
amended,
video
subtly,
creation with
but
Hey
enough.
Jen.
The trust
Simply
Linda had
type your
established for
script to get
Rachel when she
started.
was 12, the
Welcome
one
to
meant
the
to
new
protect
era
her
of video
future,
creation
cover
with Hey
college,
Jen.
give her
Simply
independence
type
had
your
been
script to get
restructured. The
started.
new trustee, Claire
Welcome
Bennett,
to the new era
Rachel
of
read the
video
clause
creation
again,
with
then
Hey
a third
Jen.
time. The
Simply
language
type
was
your script
polished,
to get started.
professional. but
Welcome to the
unmistakable,
new era of
conditions now
video
attached to
creation with
disbursement,
HeyGen.
oversight
Simply
by the
type your
household
script to get
guardian,
started.
penalties for early
Welcome
withdrawal
to the new
without
era of
consent,
video
and the
creation with
signature on the
HeyGen.
bottom wasn't
Simply
her
type your
mother's.
script
It was a
to get
near
started.
perfect imitation.
Welcome
But
to the
Rachel
new
knew
era of
Linda's
video
handwriting.
creation with
She'd spent a
HeyGen.
childhood
Simply
watching her
type
mother
your
write
script to
grocery
get
lists,
started.
birthday cards,
Welcome
notes
to the
in
new era of
lunchboxes.
video
This
creation
signature
with
didn't curl the
HeyGen.
same way.
Simply
The
type your
W
script
was
to
too
get
sharp,
started.
the spacing too
Welcome to the
mechanical.
new
She
era of
printed
video
everything
creation with
and tucked the
HeyGen.
pages into
Simply
a blue
type your
folder.
script to
Then
get
she pulled
started.
up a loose
Welcome
floorboard
to
under
the
her
new
bed,
era of
the
video
same one she
creation
used
with
to hide her
HeyGen.
high school
Simply
diaries
type your
and
script
leftover
to get
Halloween
started.
candy, and slipped the
Welcome to
folder
the new era
inside.
of video
She didn't
creation
cry.
with
She didn't
HeyGen.
rage. She
Simply
just sat
type
there,
your script
breathing
to get
evenly,
started.
staring at the
Welcome
ceiling.
to the
The
new
plaster
era
had a
of video
small crack
creation
running
with
above the
HeyGen.
window frame.
Simply
Rachel
type your
remembered
script to
tracing
get
that
started.
crack with her finger as a
Welcome to the
child,
new era
pretending
of
it was a
video
river.
creation
Back
with
then,
HeyGen.
her mother would lie
Simply
beside
type your
her and
script
ask,
to get
"Where's the
started.
river going today?"
Welcome
Rachel
to
had
the new
always
era of
answered,
video
"Home."
creation with
Now she
HeyGen.
wasn't so sure where
Simply
home
type your
was.
script
The next
to get
morning,
started.
she left the house before
Welcome to the
sunrise.
new era
She
of
didn't
video
wake her
creation
father.
with
She didn't
HeyGen.
say goodbye to
Simply
Claire.
type
She
your
just
script
drove
to get
past the bare
started.
trees, through the
Welcome
misty
to the
back
new era
roads,
of video
toward the only
creation with
person she
HeyGen.
trusted with
Simply
the
type your
truth.
script
Her
to get
grandmother,
started.
Margaret Bell, lived
Welcome
2
to
hours
the new
north,
era
in
of
a small
video
town with
creation with
antique shops
HeyGen.
and brick
Simply
sidewalks.
type your
Her
script
house was
to get
modest
started.
white shutters,
Welcome
garden
to the
gnome by
new
the
era
porch,
of video
but it
creation
smelled like
with
rosemary
HeyGen.
and old paper,
Simply type
like
your
history.
script to
When
get
Rachel
started.
knocked, Margaret
Welcome to
answered
the
in a
new era
bathrobe
of
and
video
slippers.
creation
Her
with
silver hair
HeyGen.
was tied back
Simply
in a
type
loose
your
knot.
script
She
to get
didn't look
started.
surprised to see her.
Welcome
She
to the
simply
new era
stepped
of
aside.
video
"Come
creation
in,
with HeyGen.
sweetheart." Rachel
Simply
placed
type
the
your
blue
script
folder
to
on the
get
kitchen
started.
table. Margaret
Welcome
poured
to the
tea.
new era
They
of
sat for a
video
long while
creation with
before either
HeyGen.
spoke.
Simply
When
type
Margaret
your
finally
script to get
opened the
started.
folder and began reading,
Welcome to
her
the new
hands were
era of
steady.
video
Her eyes
creation
moved
with
slowly,
HeyGen.
methodically.
Simply type
She
your
didn't
script
speak
to
until
get
she
started.
reached the final page.
Welcome to
Your
the
mother
new era
never
of video
trusted Claire.
creation with
Rachel
HeyGen.
looked up. She
Simply
didn't.
type your
Margaret
script
shook her
to get
head.
started.
She didn't dislike her,
Welcome to
but
the
she
new
didn't
era
trust
of
her.
video
Rachel
creation
thought
with
about the
HeyGen.
first time she saw
Simply
Claire
type
at
your
the
script
funeral,
to get
wearing
started.
navy blue instead of
Welcome
black,
to the new
holding
era
her
of
father's
video
arm,
creation with
offering
HeyGen.
soft-spoken
Simply
condolences
type your
and a
script to
casserole.
get started.
She moved in 3
Welcome
months
to
later.
the new era
Rachel
of video
said.
creation
Margaret
with
nodded. "I
HeyGen.
know. Did you
Simply
tell
type
Dad?
your
I
script
tried.
to get
But
started.
grief makes people
Welcome
blind,
to the new era
especially
of
men
video
like your
creation
father."
with HeyGen.
Rachel stared at her
Simply
tea.
type your
The trust
script
is
to
under
get
Claire's
started.
control now. The
Welcome
house,
to the new
too.
era
She
of
moved
video
fast,
creation
Margaret
with
said.
HeyGen.
Then added,
Simply type
"People
your
like that
script
always
to get
do.
started.
They don't steal with
Welcome
force.
to the new
They
era
steal
of
with
video
paperwork."
creation
That
with
night,
HeyGen.
Rachel stayed
Simply
at her
type your
grandmother's
script
house.
to get
She
started.
slept in the guest room with
Welcome
the quilt
to
her
the new
mother had
era of
sewn back
video
in
creation
college.
with
The
HeyGen.
stitching was
Simply
uneven.
type
The
your
colours
script
didn't
to get
match,
started.
but it was warm.
Welcome
The next
to the
day,
new era
Rachel
of video
began to build a
creation with
plan,
HeyGen.
not for revenge,
Simply
but
type
for
your script
clarity.
to get
She
started.
emailed county clerks,
Welcome to the
requested
new era of
original
video
copies of the
creation
will,
with
booked
HeyGen.
an appointment
Simply
with a
type your
notary to
script to get
confirm the
started.
signature discrepancies,
Welcome to the new
researched
era of
Claire's
video
name in
creation
public
with
court
HeyGen.
records. And what
Simply
she
type
found
your
made her
script
stomach
to get
tighten.
started.
Claire had been married
Welcome
before.
to the new
A man
era of
named
video
Edward
creation
Marsh.
with
The
HeyGen.
divorce filing
Simply
listed
type your
emotional
script to get
coercion
started.
and financial
Welcome to
manipulation.
the new
The
era
case
of
had been
video
quietly
creation with
settled.
HeyGen.
The record sealed
Simply
mostly,
type your
but
script
enough
to get
remained.
started.
Enough for Rachel
Welcome
to
to the
understand
new
what
era
was
of
happening.
video
This
creation
wasn't
with
about just
HeyGen.
one house
Simply
or
type
one
your
trust.
script to
It was
get
about
started.
erasure, about
Welcome
power,
to the new
about
era of
someone who
video
had moved into
creation
her
with
mother's
HeyGen.
space and
Simply
quietly
type your script
repainted the
to get
walls to
started.
match her own reflection.
Welcome to the
And
new
her
era of
father,
video
he didn't see
creation
it,
with
or
HeyGen.
worse, he did, and
Simply
he
type
chose
your
not to.
script to get
Rachel
started.
didn't know which hurt
Welcome
more,
to the
but
new
she
era
knew
of
one
video
thing. She
creation
couldn't
with
let her
HeyGen.
mother's memory
Simply
vanish
type your
beneath
script
scented
to get
candles
started.
and notarized
Welcome
lies.
to the new
Rachel
era of
Whitmore had
video
never been the
creation with
loud one in
HeyGen.
a room,
Simply
even as a
type your
child.
script
She
to get
listened
started.
more than she spoke.
Welcome to
While
the new
others
era
rushed to
of
be
video
heard, she
creation with
waited,
HeyGen.
watched.
Simply
Some
type
mistook
your
her
script
silence
to
for
get started.
shyness. Others saw
Welcome
her as was
the new
passive,
era of
but her
video
mother had
creation with
always known the
HeyGen.
truth. Still
Simply
water
type
runs
your
deep.
script to
Linda
get
used to
started.
say, brushing a
Welcome
strand
to
of
the new
Rachel's
era of
hair
video
behind her
creation
ear,
with
and
HeyGen.
deep water doesn't
Simply
need to
type your
shout.
script to
That
get
truth
started.
had followed Rachel
Welcome
into
to the new
adulthood.
era
It
of
guided
video
her through
creation
law
with
school,
HeyGen.
through late-night
Simply
study
type your
sessions,
script
through
to get
years of
started.
observation, and
Welcome
learning
to
how
the new
systems
era of
worked
video
and how they
creation with
failed.
HeyGen.
Now, it
Simply
became her
type your
compass
script
again
to get
as she
started.
navigated the mess
Welcome
Claire
to
had
the
so
new era
carefully
of video
constructed.
creation
She
with
didn't run
HeyGen.
straight to
Simply type
confrontation.
your script
That wasn't
to get
Rachel's
started.
way. Instead,
Welcome
she
to the
started
new
mapping
era of
everything
video
quietly
creation
bit by
with
bit,
HeyGen.
like fitting together
Simply
a
type your
jigsaw
script
puzzle
to get
someone
started.
else had tried to bury
Welcome
at
to
her
the new
grandmother's
era of
kitchen
video
table
creation
with a
with
mug of
HeyGen.
lukewarm coffee
Simply
beside
type
her.
your script
Rachel
to get
opened a
started.
new notebook. She
Welcome
drew a
to the
line
new
down the
era
middle
of
of the
video
first
creation
page
with
and
HeyGen.
labeled the columns,
Simply
what
type
I
your
know
script
and
to
what
get
I need
started.
to prove. Under
Welcome to
what
the
I
new
know,
era
she
of video
listed, the
creation
trust
with
had been
HeyGen.
altered. The
Simply
signature
type your
wasn't
script
Linda's.
to get
Claire
started.
now controlled the house
Welcome
deed
to the new
and the
era of
trust.
video
Claire's
creation
first
with
marriage
HeyGen.
ended in claims
Simply
of
type your
manipulation.
script to
Dad
get
seemed
started.
either blind or
Welcome
willfully
to the new
silent.
era of
Then,
video
under
creation
what
with
I need to
HeyGen.
prove,
Simply
she added,
type your script
forgery
to
of
get
legal
started.
documents,
Welcome to
misuse
the
of
new
trust
era of
authority,
video creation
pattern
with
of
HeyGen.
coercive behavior,
Simply type your
improper
script to
transfer
get
of
started.
assets. It wasn't a
Welcome
criminal
to the
case
new
yet,
era of
but it was
video
murky.
creation with
And if
HeyGen.
Claire thought no one
Simply
would
type your
notice,
script
she
to
had
get started.
misjudged the wrong daughter.
Welcome to
For
the
the
new
next
era
3
of
weeks,
video
Rachel
creation with
split her
HeyGen.
time between law
Simply
school
type your
assignments
script
and an
to get started.
investigation that no one had
Welcome to
assigned
the
her.
new
She
era
drove
of
to the
video
county
creation
clerk's
with
office to
HeyGen.
request copies
Simply
of
type
Linda's
your script
original
to
estate
get started.
documents will. Trust
Welcome to the
certificate,
new era
power
of
of
video
attorney.
creation
The
with
clerk,
HeyGen.
an older woman
Simply
named
type your
Marcy,
script to get
squinted at
started.
Rachel's request
Welcome
and
to
asked,
the new
"You a
era of
lawyer?"
video creation
Almost,
with
Rachel
HeyGen.
replied. My
Simply
mother
type your
passed
script to
last
get
year.
started.
Some things aren't adding
Welcome
up.
to the new
Marcy
era
didn't
of video
press. She
creation
slid
with
the manila
HeyGen.
folder across the
Simply
counter
type
with
your
a
script
tired
to get
nod as
started.
it's in my nod.
Welcome
Make
to
sure
the
you
new
use
era
the
of
copier
video
down the
creation
hall.
with
The one by
HeyGen.
the break room
Simply
works
type your
better.
script to
Rachel
get
spent
started.
2 hours comparing
Welcome to the
every
new
version
era
of the
of video
will she could
creation
find.
with
The
HeyGen.
language shift between
Simply
the
type your
original and the
script to get
revised
started.
version was subtle.
Welcome to the
Exactly
new
the
era
kind
of
of
video
thing meant to
creation
slip
with
under
HeyGen.
casual review.
Simply
In
type
the
your
original
script to
version,
get started.
Linda had appointed
Welcome
a
to the
neutral
new era of
trustee from
video
her law
creation
firm.
with
The
HeyGen.
trust was
Simply
irrevocable.
type your
Funds
script
were to
to
be
get started.
distributed to Rachel
Welcome
with no
to the new era of
contingencies
video
beyond her
creation with
age. But in
HeyGen.
the revised
Simply
version,
type your
everything
script to get
changed.
started.
Now, Claire Bennett
Welcome
was
to the
listed
new
as
era of
trustee.
video
A
creation
vague
with
clause had
HeyGen.
been added
Simply
subject to
type your
domestic
script to get
oversight,
started.
and another. Primary
Welcome to
residence
the new
asset
era of
control
video
lies with the
creation with
surviving
HeyGen.
cohabitating
Simply type your
spouse.
script
Those
to get
words sounded
started.
clinical, but
Welcome
Rachel
to
knew
the
what
new
they
era of
meant.
video
Claire had
creation
slowly
with
folded her
HeyGen.
way into the
Simply
legacy
type your
Linda left
script to get
behind
started.
and made herself
Welcome
gatekeeper.
to the new
She
era
scanned
of
the
video
signatures
creation
again.
with
The ink on the
HeyGen.
altered documents
Simply
looked
type your
fresh,
script
too
to get
fresh,
started.
for a file marked
Welcome
18
to the
months
new
old.
era of
The
video
strokes were
creation
stiff,
with
not
HeyGen.
flowing, and
Simply
Linda's
type
name,
your script
once
to get
written with a
started.
looping now
Welcome
ended
to
in
the
a
new
flat
era
line.
of video
She took the
creation
pages
with
to a
HeyGen.
handwriting expert.
Simply type
One of
your
her
script
professors
to get
had a
started.
contact retired
Welcome to the new
FBI,
era
now
of video
consulting out of a
creation
strip
with
mall in
HeyGen.
Lancaster.
Simply
The
type
man,
your script
George
to get
Howell,
started.
looked at the pages
Welcome
under
to the new era of
magnification.
video
This bottom
creation with
signature,
HeyGen.
he said,
Simply
tapping the
type your
newer
script
document.
to get started.
It's traced. You can
Welcome
see the
to the new
hesitations
era
here.
of video
And here,
creation with
Rachel
HeyGen.
leaned closer.
Simply
See that
type your
line?
script
He
to get
said,
started.
pointing. That's
Welcome
called
to the
tremor
new
of
era of
forgery.
video
Happens
creation
when
with
someone
HeyGen.
tries too hard to
Simply
copy
type
fluid
your script
handwriting.
to get started.
Can you write a report?
Welcome
Already
to the new
did,
era
he
of
said,
video
handing
creation
over
with
a printed
HeyGen.
page.
Simply
Take this
type
to
your
any
script
court.
to get
They'll
started.
at least start asking
Welcome
questions.
to the new era
Rachel
of
thanked
video
him and
creation
walked
with
out with the
HeyGen.
paper in her coat
Simply
pocket.
type your
It
script
felt like
to get
carrying
started.
something fragile
Welcome
and
to the new
dangerous
era
at
of
once,
video
like a
creation with
matchstick in a
HeyGen.
hurricane.
Simply
But she
type your
wasn't just
script to
gathering
get
legal
started.
threads. She was also
Welcome to the
watching
new
Claire
era of video
carefully. She
creation with
visited her
HeyGen.
father's house every
Simply type
Sunday
your script
under the
to get
pretense of
started.
family brunch.
Welcome
Claire
to the
always
new
greeted
era
her
of
warmly,
video
as if
creation with
nothing had
HeyGen.
happened. She
Simply
made
type your
pancakes,
script to
told
get started.
stories, laughed too
Welcome
long at
to
her
the
own
new
jokes.
era of
But
video
Rachel
creation
noticed
with
the small
HeyGen.
things. Claire
Simply
checked her
type your
husband's
script
phone
to
for
get
him.
started.
She pre-read his emails
Welcome to
before
the
he
new
did.
era of
She
video
handled the bills,
creation with
the
HeyGen.
calendar, the calls.
Simply type
When
your
Thomas
script to
mentioned
get
wanting
started.
to update his old
Welcome
car,
to the new
Claire
era
gently
of video
redirected
creation
him.
with
Why don't we
HeyGen.
wait till spring?
Simply type
Love,
your script
with the
to get
weather now.
started.
You know how your back
Welcome
gets.
to the new
When
era
Rachel
of video
asked her
creation
father
with
about the
HeyGen.
trust lightly,
Simply type your
casually he
script
blinked.
to get started.
What trust? She wanted
Welcome
to
to the new
scream.
era of
Instead,
video
she
creation
smiled.
with HeyGen.
Just something Mum
Simply
set up up a
type
while
your
ago.
script
No
to get
big deal.
started.
He waved it off.
Welcome to
Claire
the new
takes
era
care
of
of all
video
that. You
creation
know I
with
was never good
HeyGen.
with forms.
Simply
That
type
night,
your script
Rachel
to get
drove
started.
back to her apartment
Welcome
in
to the new
silence.
era
She
of
sat in
video
her car for
creation
nearly
with
20
HeyGen.
minutes,
Simply
staring at the
type your
steering
script
wheel.
to get
The air
started.
was cold enough to
Welcome
fog the
to the new
windshield.
era
She
of
didn't
video
wipe it.
creation with
Later,
HeyGen.
she called her
Simply
grandmother.
type your
She's not
script
just
to get
rewriting the
started.
legal documents,
Welcome
Rachel
to the new
said.
era
She's
of video
rewriting the
creation
man who
with
used to be
HeyGen.
my father,
Simply type
Margaret
your
didn't
script
speak
to get
right
started.
away. When she did, her
Welcome to
voice
the
was
new
calm
era of
but
video
unyielding.
creation with
Then it's
HeyGen.
time we write something
Simply
back.
type your script
Rachel
to
began
get started.
compiling everything she
Welcome
had.
to the
She
new era
created
of video
folders,
creation
digital
with
and
HeyGen.
physical. One
Simply type
labeled
your script
Will
to get
Fraud,
started.
another labeled
Welcome
Asset
to the new
Transfer,
era of video
another,
creation
more
with
personal,
HeyGen.
labeled
Simply
Simply
type your
Claire.
script
She
to get
recovered
started.
emails from old
Welcome
backups,
to the new
used a
era of
recovery
video
app to
creation
access
with
deleted
HeyGen.
messages on her
Simply type
father's
your
old
script to
shared
get started.
tablet, posed as her
Welcome
father's
to the new
assistant
era
and
of
called the
video
bank,
creation with
requesting
HeyGen.
archived
Simply
statements
type
under
your
the
script to
pretense
get
of
started.
reconciling
Welcome to the
transactions.
new
And
era
then she
of
found
video
it, a
creation
wire
with
transfer,
HeyGen. Simply type
$50,000
your
from
script
Linda's
to get
estate
started.
account to an unknown
Welcome to the
recipient
new
3
era
months
of
after
video
Claire
creation
moved
with
in,
HeyGen.
labeled
Simply
Consulting
type your script
Services.
to get
Rachel
started.
traced the recipient,
Welcome to
a
the new
boutique
era of
consulting
video
firm in
creation with
Albany,
HeyGen.
closed 6
Simply
months after
type
the
your script
transfer.
to get
Its
started.
listed director,
Welcome
Claire
to the
Bennett's
new era
cousin.
of
She
video
sat back in
creation
her
with
chair.
HeyGen.
This wasn't
Simply
grief.
type your
This wasn't
script
even
to get started.
convenience. This was a
Welcome
quiet,
to the new era of
strategic
video
siphoning
creation
of
with
memory
HeyGen.
and wealth.
Simply type
And no
your
one seemed to
script to get
notice,
started.
except Margaret.
Welcome
Her
to the
grandmother
new era
reviewed
of
the
video
compiled
creation
evidence
with
with sharp
HeyGen.
eyes and
Simply
slow
type your
sips of
script
black
to get
tea.
started.
I've seen this before,
Welcome
she
to the
said,
new era
tapping the
of video
paper.
creation
In my
with
generation,
HeyGen.
we didn't call
Simply
it
type
fraud.
your
We
script
called
to
it
get started.
helping widowers move
Welcome
on.
to the new
But it's
era
the
of
same
video
rot,
creation
dressed
with
better.
HeyGen.
What do I do?
Simply type
Margaret
your
set down her
script to get
cup.
started.
You begin with kindness.
Welcome to the
you
new
give her
era
one
of video
chance to
creation with
explain, one
HeyGen.
chance to walk
Simply
away,
type
and
your
if she
script
doesn't,
to get started.
then we tell the truth.
Welcome to
all
the
of
new
it.
era of
Rachel
video
nodded.
creation
It
with
wasn't the kind
HeyGen.
of plan they'd
Simply
teach in a
type your
courtroom,
script to
but
get
it was
started.
the kind of justice her
Welcome
mother
to
would
the
have
new
believed
era
in.
of
That
video
weekend,
creation with
Claire sent
HeyGen.
Rachel a card in the
Simply
mail.
type your
It was
script to
pale
get
pink
started.
with a white embossed
Welcome to the
rose on
new
the front.
era of video
Inside was a
creation with
note,
HeyGen.
handwritten in
Simply
looping
type your
cursive.
script to
I know
get
things
started.
have been tense lately.
Welcome
Let's
to the
talk.
new era
Just
of video
us.
creation
No
with
pressure.
HeyGen.
Dinner
Simply
Thursday.
type
You
your
choose
script
the
to get
place.
started.
Claire.
Welcome to the
Rachel
new
folded
era
the
of video
card and set it
creation
on her
with
desk.
HeyGen.
She didn't
Simply
smile,
type
but
your
she knew
script to get
exactly
started.
what to do next.
Welcome
The
to the
restaurant
new
Rachel
era of
chose
video
was
creation with
deliberate.
HeyGen.
It wasn't one of the
Simply
sleek new
type your
spots
script
Claire
to get
loves to
started.
mention in passing.
Welcome
No
to the
rooftop
new era of
lounges
video
or minimalist
creation with
plates of
HeyGen.
microgreens.
Simply
Instead,
type your
she
script
picked the
to get
Copper
started.
Sycamore, a quiet,
Welcome to the new
wood-paneled
era of
inn
video
on the edge of
creation with
Carlisle.
HeyGen.
The kind of place
Simply
where the
type your
waiters
script
wore
to get
real
started.
vests and the
Welcome
floors
to the new
creaked
era
beneath
of video
decades of
creation
Sunday
with
shoes.
HeyGen.
Her mother had
Simply
brought her
type
there
your script
once,
to
the
get
night
started.
before her first high
Welcome
school
to the
debate
new era
tournament.
of video
The food's
creation
nothing
with HeyGen.
fancy, Linda had
Simply
said,
type your
smiling
script
as
to
they
get
split
started.
a pecan pie.
Welcome
But there's
to the
truth
new
in
era
simple
of
things.
video
Now,
creation with
years
HeyGen.
later, Rachel
Simply
sat in the
type your
same
script
corner
to get
booth,
started.
her fingers tracing the
Welcome to
grain
the
of the
new era
old
of
oak
video
table.
creation with
Waiting.
HeyGen.
Claire arrived
Simply
10
type
minutes
your
early.
script
Of
to get
course she
started.
did. She wore a black
Welcome to
wool
the new
coat
era
with
of
satin
video
trim and
creation
heels
with
that
HeyGen.
clicked against the
Simply
tile
type your
like
script to
punctuation
get started.
marks. Her blonde hair was
Welcome to
pinned
the
back
new era of
elegantly,
video
and her
creation
lipstick
with
matched the
HeyGen.
Merlot
Simply
already
type
poured
your
into
script to
Rachel's
get started.
untouched glass.
Welcome
Rachel,
to the new
she
era
said,
of video
all
creation
warmth and
with
poise,
HeyGen.
as if they were
Simply
two
type
old
your
friends
script to get
reuniting
started.
after a misunderstanding.
Welcome to the
You
new
look
era of
lovely.
video creation
Rachel
with
didn't
HeyGen.
stand. Thank
Simply
you for
type
coming.
your script
Claire slid
to get
into the
started.
seat across from her.
Welcome
She didn't
to the
order
new
a drink.
era of
She
video
didn't glance at
creation
the
with
menu.
HeyGen.
Her hands folded
Simply
over
type
each
your
other
script
with
to get
practiced
started.
grace. I wasn't sure
Welcome
you'd
to
say
the new
yes,
era of
Claire
video
said,
creation
but I'm
with
glad you did.
HeyGen.
Rachel
Simply
nodded
type your
once.
script
I
to
think
get
we both
started.
knew this conversation
Welcome
was
to the
coming.
new era
There was a
of video
pause,
creation
quiet
with
but
HeyGen.
weighted. As the
Simply
waiter
type your
approached,
script
they
to get
ordered
started.
quickly. Rachel chose
Welcome
a
to the
salad
new
she
era
wouldn't
of
eat.
video
Claire
creation with
selected
HeyGen.
trout almondine
Simply
without
type your
asking the
script to get
specials.
started.
When the waiter left,
Welcome
Claire
to the
leaned
new
in
era of
slightly.
video
I know things
creation
have
with
been
HeyGen.
tense, she
Simply
began,
type
her
your
tone
script to get
careful.
started.
Your father and
Welcome
we've
to the
tried
new
to give you
era of
space,
video
but I
creation
worry
with
we may have
HeyGen.
misunderstood
Simply
each other.
type your script
Rachel
to get
didn't answer
started.
right away. She
Welcome
picked
to
up
the
her
new
glass
era
but
of
didn't
video
drink.
creation
You've
with
been in
HeyGen.
control of my mother's
Simply
trust
type
for
your
nearly a
script
year
to get
now,
started.
she said. The house
Welcome
deed
to
was
the new era
transferred occurred
of
6
video
days
creation
before
with
Christmas.
Hey-Jen.
The signature on
Simply
the
type your
amendment to the
script to
trust
get
is
started.
not my mother's.
Welcome
The
to the
forensic
new
report
era
says
of
it was
video
traced.
creation with
Claire
Hey-Jen.
blinked. Her mouth
Simply
opened
type your
just
script
slightly,
to get
but
started.
Rachel kept going.
Welcome
There was
to the
also
new
a payment
era of
$50
video creation
from
with
the estate
Hey-Jen.
to a consulting
Simply type
firm
your
linked
script
to your
to get
cousin.
started.
That firm dissolved
Welcome to
4
the new
months
era
later.
of video
The silence
creation
that
with
followed
Hey-Jen.
wasn't empty.
Simply
It
type your
buzzed like
script to
static.
get started.
Claire's hands stayed
Welcome
folded.
to the
Her
new
posture
era of
didn't
video
change.
creation
That's
with
a lot of
Hey-Jen.
very very serious
Simply type
claims.
your script
Rachel,
to get started.
they aren't claims.
Welcome
Rachel
to the new
replied
era of
evenly.
video
They're
creation
facts,
with Hey Jen.
documented,
Simply type your
cross-verified,
script to get
shared
started.
with legal counsel.
Welcome to
Claire
the new
exhaled
era of
slowly.
video
And what do
creation
you
with
want
Hey
from
Jen.
me? That was the
Simply
question.
type your
The one they
script
both
to get
came
started.
for. Rachel didn't
Welcome
raise her
to the
voice.
new era
She
of
didn't lean
video
forward.
creation
Her
with Hey
tone
Jen.
remained calm,
Simply
cool,
type your
even,
script
but
to
her
get
words
started.
were shaped like
Welcome
stone.
to the
I
new
want the
era
trust
of video
returned to its
creation
original
with Hey
structure.
Jen.
I want
Simply
the deed
type your
transferred
script
back.
to get
I want
started.
you to sign a formal
Welcome to the
separation
new
from the
era of
estate.
video
No
creation with
lawsuits,
Hey Jen.
no courtroom
Simply
drama,
type your
just a
script
clean
to get
exit.
started.
Claire laughed,
Welcome
soft
to
and
the new
brittle.
era of
And if I
video
don't,
creation with
Rachel
Hey
slid a
Jen.
file folder
Simply
across the
type your
table.
script to get
Inside
started.
were printed
Welcome
statements,
to the new
comparison
era of
scans
video
of the
creation with Hey
signatures,
Jen.
and a notarized
Simply type your
affidavit from the
script to get
handwriting
started.
expert. I'm prepared
Welcome
to
to the
submit
new
this
era
to the
of video
estate court.
creation
If
with
I
Hey
do,
Jen.
it becomes
Simply
public.
type your
Your
script
previous
to get
marriage
started.
records are still sealed.
Welcome to
but
the
this
new
won't
era
be.
of video
Claire's
creation
jaw
with Hey
tensed.
Jen.
Her fingers twitched
Simply
just
type your
once.
script
You've
to
gone
get
to
started.
great lengths, she
Welcome
said.
to the
For
new
what?
era of video
Money.
creation
This was
with Hey
never
Jen.
about money.
Simply type
Rachel
your
replied,
script to
it's
get
about
started.
erasure. You've
Welcome
taken
to the new
everything my
era of
mother
video
left and
creation
made it
with Hey
yours,
Jen.
piece by
Simply
piece.
type
The
your
house,
script
the
to get started.
documents, even the
Welcome
narrative.
to the new
You've
era of
replaced her
video
in memory
creation with
and
Hey Jen.
legally. Claire
Simply
looked away
type your
for the
script
first
to get
time
started.
out the window, where a
Welcome
soft
to the
snow
new
had
era
begun
of
to
video
fall over the
creation with
parking
Hey
lot.
Jen.
She didn't speak
Simply
for
type
several
your script
seconds.
to get
When she
started.
did, her voice was
Welcome
quieter.
to the new
Do you
era
know
of
what it's
video
like to be
creation
alone
with
in your
Hey Jen.
40s? To
Simply
have no
type your
anchor,
script to
no
get
place
started.
to land. Your father
Welcome
was
to the new
drowning.
era of video
Rachel, I
creation
didn't
with
push
Hey
him.
Jen.
I offered him a
Simply
hand.
type your
Rachel's
script
voice
to get
didn't
started.
change. Offering a
Welcome
hand
to the
doesn't
new
include
era of
altering
video
a
creation
will.
with
You
Hey
think this
Jen.
was some scheme.
Simply type your
Claire's tone
script to
rose.
get started.
Sharp now. I cared
Welcome
for that
to the
man.
new
I
era
kept
of
him
video
sane.
creation
You
with
think
Hey
love
Jen.
is clean
Simply
and
type your
contractually
script
polite.
to get started.
It's not. It's
Welcome
messy.
to the new
It's
era
ugly
of video
sometimes.
creation
And
with
yes,
Hey
it
Jen.
includes
Simply
survival.
type your
Rachel
script
stared
to
at
get
her.
started.
I don't question whether you
Welcome
loved
to the
him.
new
I
era of
question
video
whether you
creation with
respected
Hey
her.
Jen.
Claire flinched,
Simply
just
type your
slightly,
script to
but
get
Rachel
started.
saw it. The food
Welcome
arrived
to the
then.
new era
Plates
of video
placed,
creation
water
with Hey
glasses
Jen.
refilled,
Simply
polite
type
nods
your script
exchanged.
to get
Neither
started.
of them touched their meal.
Welcome
I
to the
don't want
new
to
era
destroy
of
you,
video
Rachel
creation
said
with Hey
after the
Jen.
waiter left.
Simply
But
type
I
your
will not
script
let you
to get
destroy
started.
what my mother left
Welcome
behind.
to the new
Claire's
era of
eyes
video
had changed.
creation with
The
Hey
gloss
Jen.
was gone.
Simply
The polish
type your
dulled.
script to
She
get
looked
started.
tired. Do you think this
Welcome
makes
to the
you
new
noble?
era of
She
video
asked,
creation
like
with
some
Hey
quiet
Jen.
crusader
Simply
for the
type
dead.
your
No,
script to get
Rachel said
started.
simply. It makes
Welcome
me her
to the new
daughter.
era
For a
of video
moment,
creation
Claire
with
didn't
Hey Jen.
respond. Then
Simply
she reached
type
into
your
her
script
purse
to get
and
started.
pulled out a pen. Draw
Welcome
it up.
to the new
I'll
era of
sign.
video
Rachel
creation
didn't
with
move.
Hey Jen.
No tricks,
Simply
no
type your
delays.
script
Claire
to get
smiled
started.
without mirth. You already
Welcome to
know
the
I'm
new
capable
era
of
of
both.
video
She
creation
signed the
with Hey
draft
Jen.
agreement Rachel
Simply
had prepared
type your script
and
to
folded
get
the
started.
pages neatly back into
Welcome
the
to the
folder.
new era
Her
of
signature,
video
this one was
creation with Hey
quick,
Jen.
practiced,
Simply type your
unhesitating.
script
When
to
she
get
looked
started.
back up, her voice was
Welcome
calm
to the
again.
new era
You'll
of
win.
video
You know,
creation with
they'll
Hey
say you
Jen.
were strong,
Simply type your
principled.
script
Rachel
to
said
get started.
nothing. But strength and
Welcome to
kindness
the new
aren't the
era of
same.
video
Claire
creation
added,
with Hey
softer
Jen.
now. You
Simply
should
type
remember
your
that.
script to get
Rachel
started.
rose from the table.
Welcome
Her
to
coat
the
was
new
still
era of
draped over
video
the back of the
creation with
chair.
Hey
As she
Jen.
shrugged it on,
Simply
she
type your
turned
script
once.
to get
My mother
started.
taught me both.
Welcome
Claire
to the
didn't
new era of
stand.
video
She didn't offer a
creation with
parting
Hey Jen.
word. Rachel
Simply
walked
type
out
your
into the
script to
cold
get
air.
started.
The snow had begun to
Welcome
settle
to
on
the
the
new era
pavement,
of video
thin and
creation
pale
with Hey
like
Jen.
ash. The sky
Simply
was
type your
dark,
script
but not
to get
heavy.
started.
As she stepped into the
Welcome to the
parking
new
lot,
era of
she
video
felt something
creation with Hey Jen.
unexpected, quiet
Simply
peace,
type your
not
script to get
triumph,
started.
not vengeance,
Welcome
just
to the
peace.
new
It was
era of
done,
video
and it was
creation with
enough.
Hey Jen.
Spring returned to
Simply
Carlisle
type
with
your
a kind
script
of
to get started.
gentleness Rachel hadn't
Welcome
felt
to
in
the new
years.
era
The
of
frost
video
melted
creation with
early
Hey
that
Jen.
March, leaving
Simply
behind
type your
soft,
script
damp
to get
soil and a
started.
whisper of green
Welcome
that
to
crept
the new
across
era
yards
of
and
video
roadside
creation with
ditches
Hey Jen.
like a memory
Simply type your
reawakening.
script
On the
to get
first warm
started.
afternoon of the season,
Welcome to the
Rachel
new era
pulled
of
into the
video
driveway of her
creation with Hey
childhood
Jen.
home, now
Simply
legally
type your
hers
script to get
once
started.
again. She stepped out of her
Welcome
car
to the new
slowly,
era
as
of
if
video
testing the
creation
weight
with
of
Hey
presents.
Jen.
The house
Simply
looked
type
the
your
same,
script
but
to
it
get
also
started.
didn't. The shutters were
Welcome
still
to the
navy
new
blue.
era of
The
video
porch swing
creation with
creaked
Hey
faintly
Jen.
in the breeze,
Simply
but there
type
was
your
something
script to get
different in the
started.
silence, a kind
Welcome
of
to the
quiet
new
that
era
wasn't
of
hollow
video
anymore.
creation with Hey
Inside,
Jen.
the air smelled
Simply
like
type your
cedar
script
and
to get
old
started.
books. Rachel
Welcome
moved
to
through
the
the
new
rooms
era
one
of
by
video
one.
creation
The
with Hey
chandelier in the
Jen.
dining room
Simply
had been
type your
replaced
script
again,
to get
not with the
started.
old one too much had
Welcome to
changed
the
for
new
that,
era
but
of
with a
video
fixture
creation
Rachel
with Hey
found in a
Jen.
local
Simply
antique
type
store.
your script
Brass,
to get started.
hand-blown glass, a
Welcome
little little
to the new
crooked.
era
It
of
cast a
video
soft,
creation with
uneven
Hey
glow
Jen.
across the table.
Simply
In
type
the
your script
hallway,
to get
Linda's
started.
framed photos had
Welcome to
returned,
the new
not as
era
a
of
shrine,
video
but
creation
as a
with Hey
story.
Jen.
Each frame
Simply
told a
type your
chapter.
script to
Linda
get
in
started.
gardening gloves,
Welcome
Rachel
to
as
the
a
new
toddler
era
in
of
her
video
lap,
creation
Thomas
with Hey
carving a
Jen.
Thanksgiving
Simply
turkey
type your
in
script
happier
to get
years.
started.
Rachel paused in
Welcome
front
to
of
the
one
new
photo,
era
her
of
mother
video
laughing,
creation with Hey
sunlit,
Jen.
eyes
Simply
closed.
type your
That
script
laugh had
to
not
get started.
echoed in this house for a
Welcome
long
to the new
time.
era
But
of video
somehow, in
creation
that
with Hey
moment,
Jen.
Rachel felt
Simply
it again,
type your
not as
script
sound,
to get
but as
started.
presence. She
Welcome
walked
to
out
the
to the
new era
garden.
of
It had
video
been
creation
neglected
with Hey
for
Jen.
months. Weeds
Simply type
tangled
your
between
script to get
stones.
started.
The hydrangea bushes
Welcome
were
to the
brittle,
new
but
era
not
of video
gone.
creation
Underneath
with
the
Hey
decay,
Jen.
there was still
Simply
life
type your
waiting.
script
Rachel
to get
knelt in the
started.
dirt and pulled on a
Welcome
pair
to
of
the new
old
era of
gloves.
video
The fabric
creation
was
with
loose
Hey
in
Jen.
places, worn
Simply
thin
type
at the
your script
fingertips,
to get
but it
started.
held. She began
Welcome to the
slowly,
new era
cutting
of
back
video
the dead
creation
growth,
with Hey
turning
Jen.
soil with her
Simply
hands.
type
By
your
sundown,
script to
she
get
had
started.
cleared a patch beside the
Welcome
old
to the
stone
new era
path.
of video
She planted
creation with Hey
camellias
Jen.
and rosemary,
Simply
same
type
as
your
her
script
mother
to
once
get
had.
started.
As she worked,
Welcome to
neighbors
the new
passed on
era
their
of video
evening walks.
creation with
Some
Hey Jen.
paused, unsure
Simply
whether to
type your
wave.
script to
Others
get
simply
started.
nodded. One woman,
Welcome to the
Mrs.
new
Hayworth
era
from
of
3
video
doors down,
creation with
stopped
Hey
at the
Jen.
fence. It's
Simply
good to see
type
you
your
here
script
again,
to
she
get
said
started.
quietly. Rachel
Welcome
offered
to
a
the new
tired
era of
smile.
video
It's good to
creation
be
with Hey
back.
Jen.
She didn't mention
Simply
Claire.
type your
No
script
one
to
did.
get
The
started.
silence said enough.
Welcome
That
to the
summer,
new era
Rachel
of video
returned to law
creation
school
with
with a
Hey
new
Jen.
focus.
Simply
She finished
type
her
your
final
script to get
semester at the
started.
top of her class.
Welcome
No
to the new era
celebrations,
of video
no
creation
announcements,
with Hey
just a
Jen.
quiet walk
Simply
across a
type your
stage,
script to
a
get
folded
started.
diploma, and the
Welcome
sound of
to
her
the
name
new era
pronounced
of video
correctly.
creation
She
with
passed
Hey
the bar
Jen.
exam that
Simply
autumn.
type your
When the
script
letter
to get
arrived
started.
confirming her admission
Welcome
to
to
the
the new
state
era
bar,
of
she
video
sat in her
creation with
grandmother's
Hey
old
Jen.
rocker and
Simply
read it
type
3
your script
times.
to get
Margaret
started.
had passed a few months
Welcome
earlier,
to the new
peacefully,
era of video
in her
creation
sleep.
with
No
Hey Jen.
drama, no
Simply
dares,
type your
just a
script
note
to get
tucked into a
started.
box of letters
Welcome to
labeled,
the new
For
era
Rachel.
of video
The letter was
creation with
brief,
Hey Jen.
truth whispers,
Simply
but if you
type your
listen long
script
enough,
to get
it
started.
becomes thunder. Keep
Welcome to the
listening.
new era
Rachel
of video
folded the letter
creation with
and
Hey
placed it
Jen.
on the bookshelf
Simply
beside
type
a
your
worn
script to
teacup
get started.
and a framed clipping
Welcome
of the
to the new era
Constitution.
of
She
video
didn't start a
creation with
flashy
Hey
practice.
Jen.
Instead,
Simply
she
type
took
your
a
script
modest
to get
office above a
started.
bakery downtown.
Welcome
The
to the
building
new era
smelled
of
like
video
cinnamon
creation
and
with Hey Jen.
ambition. Her name
Simply
was
type your
stenciled
script
on the
to get
frosted
started.
glass door. Rachel
Welcome to the new
Whitmore,
era of
attorney
video
at
creation
law.
with
Her
Hey
first
Jen.
cases were quiet
Simply
ones.
type your
Wills
script to get
contested by
started.
distant relatives.
Welcome to the
Guardianship
new era of
requests.
video
A
creation
teacher
with
trying
Hey
to
Jen.
protect her niece
Simply
from being
type your
pulled
script
into a
to get
custody
started.
battle. Nothing
Welcome
high
to the
profile,
new era
but
of video
important.
creation with
Still,
Hey
she
Jen.
worked quietly,
Simply type your
steadily.
script to
People
get started.
noticed. They called her
Welcome to the
reliable,
new era of
methodical,
video creation
patient.
with Hey
One
Jen.
local paper ran
Simply
a short
type your
feature,
script
The
to get
Heir to
started.
Quiet Justice.
Welcome
Rachel
to the
never
new era
responded
of
to the
video
interview
creation
requests.
with Hey
She
Jen.
didn't need to.
Simply
Her work
type
spoke
your
for
script
itself.
to get
One
started.
afternoon, late in the
Welcome to
year,
the new
a young
era of
girl,
video
no older
creation
than
with
9,
Hey
stepped
Jen.
into her
Simply
office.
type your
She wore a
script to
faded
get started.
hoodie and carried a
Welcome to
plastic
the
bag
new
full
era
of
of video
letters.
creation
My grandma
with Hey
died,
Jen.
she said
Simply
softly.
type
And
your
now my
script
aunt
to get
says we
started.
have to move. But
Welcome to the
Grandma
new
said
era
the
of
house was
video
mine.
creation with
Rachel
Hey
knelt
Jen.
beside her
Simply
chair.
type
Did
your
your
script
grandma
to get
leave
started.
a will? The girl nodded.
Welcome to the
I
new
think so.
era of
These
video
are her
creation
letters.
with Hey
Rachel
Jen.
opened the bag
Simply
gently.
type your script to
Inside
get
were
started.
notes, receipts,
Welcome
a
to the
handwritten
new
copy
era
of a
video
will
creation with
unwitnessed.
Hey Jen.
But clear,
Simply
I
type your
understand,
script
Rachel
to get
said.
started.
That was all the girl
Welcome
needed
to
to
the new
hear.
era
By
of video
spring, the
creation
case
with
had
Hey Jen.
settled. The girl
Simply
kept her
type your
house.
script to
Rachel
get
never
started.
billed for the hours.
Welcome to
That
the
became
new
a
era of
pattern.
video
She took
creation
pro
with Hey
bono
Jen.
work when no one else
Simply
would.
type your
She sat
script
with
to get
clients who
started.
didn't have the words to
Welcome to the
explain their
new era
pain.
of
She
video
listened
creation
until
with
the
Hey
truth
Jen.
whispered clearly
Simply
enough to
type your
follow.
script
Back
to
at
get
the Whitmore
started.
home, the
Welcome
seasons
to the new
turned.
era
Each
of video
spring,
creation
Rachel
with Hey
tended the
Jen.
garden. The
Simply
hydrangeas
type your
bloomed
script
again.
to get
So did the
started.
camellias. The
Welcome
rosemary
to the
bushes
new
grew
era of
thick
video
and fragrant.
creation with Hey
Inside,
Jen.
the old
Simply
fireplace
type your
remained
script to get
untouched,
started.
except for a single
Welcome to the
photograph
new
on the
era of
mantel.
video
Rachel
creation
and
with Hey
Linda,
Jen.
side by side,
Simply type your
muddy
script
and
to get
laughing
started.
after a storm had flattened
Welcome
their
to the
garden
new
one
era
summer.
of video
Every
creation
December,
with Hey
Rachel
Jen.
lit one
Simply
white
type your
candle and
script
placed
to
it
get
on the
started.
windowsill in the dining
Welcome
room.
to the
She
new
didn't
era of
explain
video
it. No
creation
one
with
asked.
Hey Jen.
Thomas Whitmore
Simply
came
type
once
your script
after
to
Margaret's
get started.
funeral. He stood on the
Welcome
porch
to
in a
the new
suit too
era of
large
video
for him,
creation
holding
with
a small
Hey Jen.
envelope.
Simply
Rachel
type your
invited him
script to
inside.
get started.
They sat in the living room
Welcome to the
without
new
turning
era
on
of
the
video
lights. I
creation
never
with
saw
Hey
it,
Jen.
Thomas said.
Simply
What
type
she
your
was
script
doing,
to
what
get
I let
started.
happen. Rachel
Welcome
didn't
to the new
speak. I
era
was
of
weak,
video
he
creation
added.
with Hey
You were
Jen.
grieving,
Simply
Rachel
type your
replied.
script
He
to
looked
get
at her.
started.
That's not an
Welcome
excuse.
to the
No,
new era
she
of
said.
video
But it's a
creation with Hey
reason.
Jen.
He nodded
Simply
and handed
type
her
your
the
script
envelope.
to get started.
Inside was a photograph
Welcome
of
to the
Linda
new
and
era of
Thomas
video
at their
creation
wedding.
with Hey
Slightly
Jen.
faded,
Simply
edges
type your
curled.
script
I
to
found
get
it in a
started.
drawer. he said.
Welcome to
Claire
the
must
new
have forgotten
era
to
of
throw
video
it out.
creation with
Rachel
Hey
didn't
Jen.
smile,
Simply
but she
type
held
your
the photo
script to get
carefully.
started.
I'm sorry, her
Welcome
father
to the
said.
new era
I know,
of video
he stayed for
creation with
tea.
Hey
They
Jen.
didn't talk about
Simply
Claire
type
again.
your
He
script
left
to get
before
started.
dark, leaving behind
Welcome
the
to the
photograph
new
and a
era of
note that
video
simply read,
creation with Hey
"Thank you
Jen.
for saving what
Simply
I
type
couldn't."
your script
Years
to get
passed.
started.
Rachel never
Welcome
moved out
to
of
the
the
new
house.
era of
She
video
updated the
creation with
kitchen,
Hey Jen.
painted the walls,
Simply
added a
type your
library
script to
upstairs
get
where her
started.
childhood bedroom used to
Welcome to
be,
the new
but she
era
never
of video
tried to turn it
creation
into
with Hey
something
Jen.
it wasn't.
Simply
The
type your
house remained a
script to get
home,
started.
not a trophy.
Welcome
and Claire,
to the new
she
era of
remarried
video
once,
creation
then
with Hey
divorced
Jen.
again, moved
Simply
south,
type your
changed
script
her
to get
name
started.
briefly, then dropped out
Welcome
of
to the
social
new era
circles.
of video
No
creation
lawsuits,
with Hey
no
Jen.
articles,
Simply
just
type your
fading
script to get
footprints in
started.
soft soil.
Welcome
People
to the
forgot
new
her.
era of
Rachel
video
didn't,
creation
but
with
she
Hey
no
Jen.
longer needed to
Simply type
remember.
your script
Justice
to get
had been
started.
done. Not loudly,
Welcome to
not
the new
dramatically,
era of video
but fully.
creation
One
with Hey
day,
Jen.
as the sun
Simply
set behind
type
the
your
garden,
script to get
Rachel
started.
stood by the porch railing,
Welcome to the
a mug
new
of
era
tea
of
in
video
hand.
creation
She
with
listened
Hey
to the
Jen.
wind rustling the
Simply type your
hydrangeas,
script
to
to
the
get
faint hum
started.
of life returning
Welcome
again
to the
and
new
again
era of
in
video
cycles.
creation
She
with Hey
thought of
Jen.
Linda, of
Simply
Margaret,
type your
of the
script to
quiet
get
power
started.
passed from one
Welcome
woman
to the
to the
new era
next,
of video
not through
creation with Hey
inheritance,
Jen.
but through
Simply type
presence,
your
through
script to get
values that
started.
didn't need applause,
Welcome
through
to the new
choices made
era
in
of video
silence that
creation with
still
Hey Jen.
echoed. Rachel
Simply
had never
type your
raised her
script to
voice.
get
She had
started.
never demanded to be
Welcome
seen,
to the
but she
new
had
era
made
of
herself
video creation
impossible
with
to
Hey
ignore.
Jen.